afternoon. I think the bottleneck in Jericho is coming up. Thank you all for coming today. So we basically decided to invite Dr. Cynthia Neal Spence after a group of us went to a summer institute on high impact practices. And during that institute, we actually met one of her previous students, what's her name? Jacinta, who highly recommended her, had done research with her when she was at Spielman, right? You'll tell me. Yeah. But she said that she would be great and exactly what we were looking for. So Dr. Cynthia Neal Spence is an associate professor of sociology at Piedmont College. Her teaching and research areas are in the areas of sociology, criminology, law, and violence against women, and supports the law and criminology concentration in the college's Department of Sociology. She has served as a consultant for the Ford Foundation Institutional Transformation Project, the University of Chicago Provost Initiative of Minority Affairs, the Agnes Scott College Center for Teaching and Learning, and the Georgia Department of Corrections. In addition to her faculty position at Spelman, Dr. Spence serves as the director of the UNCF Mellon programs, and Dr. Spence is the recipient of the Spelman College Alumni Achievement Tiffany Award and the Fannie Lou Hamer Community Service Award, and she currently serves as the board of directors in the Washington Internship Institute. That's a mouthful. So this is really a kickoff event for an event we're having this spring called the Lions Pride, which is Piedmont Research, Innovation, and Discovery Expedition. So we're trying to gear up for that, and so we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. But in the coming days, you'll see a form that you guys can sign up to present some of your research and things like that. And so she's going to talk to you more about how to get research involved in your courses. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I just want to thank all of my hosts, Julie and Sandra. I mean, you all have just been amazing. And I know that you all already know that you have these jewels working here at Piedmont College. This is my first visit to Piedmont College. So I've never been in this area. I'm an Atlanta native, but I've never really traveled much to North Georgia. So it's really nice to be up here. The weather is very nice, and everyone's been extremely friendly. So thank you so much for making this a warm first visit to your campus. As Julie mentioned, Jacinta Safford is a member of the Mellon Mays Undergraduate Fellowship Program. That is a program that is, in fact, has at its core undergraduate research. It is a national program that is, in fact, funded by the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, which is probably one of the largest philanthropic organizations in the country, but very quiet about their money, right? But they fund higher education initiatives. And so the primary goal of the Mellon Mays Undergraduate Fellowship Program is, in fact, to increase the number of students of color, but also diverse students who are interested in the goals of the Mellon Mays Undergraduate Fellowship Program to pursue the PhD in order to become college faculty members. And in order to become a college faculty member, you have to go and get a PhD, right? And so we were just talking, I was talking to a few students as you all were coming in about the importance of undergraduate research. And so that's one of the many reasons why undergraduate research is so important, because some of you in this audience may be ultimately interested in going on to pursue a PhD in your various fields of endeavor. And having a research experiences as a part of your portfolio of experiences is very important. And so today we're going to talk a bit about how we go about creating undergraduate research experiences within the context of institutions to kind of strengthen the teaching and learning environment. And so how many of you are already involved in some form of research? How many? Hands up, don't be shy. Okay, so just a few of you. And so the goal for Piedmont College in terms of the QEP project is really to increase the number of students who are engaged in undergraduate research. And we're saying not just at the junior and senior level, but actually as students enter into the institution, that would be perhaps one of the reasons why students want to come to Piedmont, because you have such interesting research opportunities. And I'll talk a little bit about how we go about doing that once I figure out how to do let's see here. Oh, well, turning it on will be important, right? Let's see here. How do we? Well, Sorry about that. Yeah, I'm not sure. Okay, thank you. All righty. Okay, so let's, well, technology. Oh, okay, we don't want that to happen. Okay, so one of the things that I always do is when I'm looking at colleges and universities and when I'm going around trying to assist them with a variety of initiatives, I always look at what is it that the college says. Yeah, what is it? What's the statement? What's the rhetoric? What is the written statement? And so when we look at the mission and core values of Piedmont College, it says that Piedmont College dedicates itself to the transformative power of education through reciprocal learning, the development of compassionate leaders, and the stewardship of our local and global communities, right? All of you knew that, right? If I were to stop you on campus and I'd say, what's the mission of Piedmont College? You all should have been able to just spout that out, right? Yeah, maybe not. Okay, so that's your mission statement. That is your mission statement, and your mission statement is really your guiding document. But as we think about how does Piedmont College actually actualize the goals that are indicated within this mission statement, one of the ways is that you have a variety of pedagogical practices here, but one way that the QEP is hoping you will be able to realize this mission statement is in fact through undergraduate research. And we know that reciprocal learning can in fact be a part of an undergraduate research experience. So as students, you know that you have one job and faculty members have another job. But what we find is that when you pair faculty members with students, when you pair them through research experiences in ways that they are in fact enhancing their own individual experiences or enhancing the students' question and problem posing, that the relationship becomes one of reciprocity because the two of you share a common goal. And so certainly we know that we might be able to incorporate some of, or to actualize this mission statement through undergraduate research experiences, the development of compassionate leaders. When we do community action-based research, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, oftentimes that research not only expands a student's portfolio of knowledge, but it also helps a student to develop a sense of empathy about the communities that she or he is serving at the time as they're working together to create research projects that end with certain definable action steps. And then also stewardship of local and global communities. Again, as we are all citizens of the world, okay, I know we're up here at Piedmont College and we're, oftentimes in a very kind of small island, but the reality is that everyone in here is actually a citizen of the world. You may see yourself as a citizen of, I know our camera crew is a citizen of Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I told him, I said, my husband grew up in Chattanooga, Tennessee, but Chattanooga is just one little dot. It's just one little dot as you look at the entire world. And so as we are individuals at Piedmont College, you are in fact trying to determine how you become impactful not only in your own circle, but how is it that your research or the questions that you ask might in fact engage you with the rest of the world community. Now Piedmont has these core values, and you all know the inquiry, service, and legacy. Inquiry certainly is supported by this notion of asking questions about what is, asking questions about what is not, asking questions of why, okay? Why does something exist, okay? Not accepting the status quo. This is inquiry-based learning, being able to engage and push the canon of a particular discipline. Actually asking questions about why am I reading this? Why is this text important in my mass communications class? Or why is this text important in my English class? What is the canon within that particular discipline? And who's missing from the canon? These are inquiry questions. We're asking questions. We're pushing the envelope in a bit. Service. Clearly you all are very much engaged in civic engagement, and certainly through service there's personal growth and ethical reasoning that comes about. So I know that experiential learning is something that is very big at Piedmont College. And so we want to think about, are there ways to engage the experiential learning experiences into research-based experiential learning experiences? And then certainly the legacy. We know that Piedmont College was founded in, 1897? And it was founded during a particular period of history. I represent Spelman College. We were founded in 1881, so we're older than Piedmont College. We were founded for the very specific purpose of providing education to the children of individuals who had been newly emancipated, right? And it's for women. It's always been a women's college. We've never had coeducational discussions, nor will we have coeducational discussions. I'm here to stand for that, right? But it's always been a women's college. So what's the legacy that Piedmont College is providing for you as students, and how are you a part of the legacy? These are actual research questions. And so what I'm saying to you is that oftentimes we can just look at something as words on a blank sheet of paper, but we don't really think about how do you animate the rhetoric. And how might we animate the rhetoric through research? So for instance, in 1897, the Congregational Church decided to found a college like Piedmont, but what other colleges were founded during the same time? What are the similarities and differences? The reality is when Piedmont College was founded by the Congregationalists, there were also certain historically black colleges founded during that same time. Are their mission statements the same? Are their legacies the same? What questions in society were they founded to answer? What do the archives say to us about the founding of our institutions? These are research questions, and research questions that can be done through individual research, group research, faculty, student research, okay? When we look at the components of QEP, we know undergraduate research, creative inquiry, I've talked about that. Leadership is the component of it. You know, who are the leaders on campus? How does one designate who the leaders are? Which organizations are the organizations where you will have leaders? Is there a hierarchy of leadership on the campus? I'm a sociologist, and one of our early sociologists, C. Wright Mills, talks about the power elite. Right? Power elite, according to Mills in the 1950s, was corporations, was government, as well as the military, right? But my students say, well, there's a power elite that exists on campus. Well, who are the power elite? Are they the athletes? Are they sorority and fraternity members? Are they members of SGA? Who are the leaders on campus, and what are the skills that are necessary for leadership development? Have they changed over time? Can you in fact do a contextual analysis of Piedmont College in the 1960s versus the 1970s versus the 1980s to the 2000s? Did leadership roles change? Are more female students leaders than male students? Or is there a gendered analysis? Is there a regional analysis? These are all questions that can be asked. How does one define leadership in the 21st century versus leadership in the 19th century? Do we live in a particular moment in history where leadership is more needed? Are millennials leaders? Are they born leaders? Or were other generations considered born leaders? These are all questions that one can ask while you are, in fact, exercising your leadership development. Global learning. I know that at Piedmont, students are going abroad. How many students have studied abroad already? Okay, a few have. And how many plan to study abroad? Maybe, all right. Well, clearly the Maymester program, the other programs that are available for students, I say you should go. If you can go, you need to step outside of your comfort zone. You really need to go. And there are a lot of reasons why students are hesitant about studying abroad, but it is in fact a life-changing experience. But when you go abroad, what do? Do you just sightsee? Or do you actually prepare? Do you do research prior to going? Are there questions that you wish to have answered through that study abroad experience? Or are there questions that are in fact stimulated from that study abroad experience? And so what we're doing, we're really thinking about the various ways that we can engage research and identify researchable topics. We know that there are a number of core values that are related to undergraduate research. So community-based action research. Many of you are interested. How many students are in this room? I'm just doing a research question. How many students in this room are concerned about making an impact in your home community, that you saw something about your home where you left, there was some issue, some social issue that you were really concerned about and said, you know what, if I could do this, I would make a change. How many of you are interested in that? What kinds of issues?
Schools and funding.
Okay, funding for schools. Okay, and because funding from school is related to what? Inequitable experiences in schools, right? Some are funded more than others. And when they're differentially funded, the results are different. Okay, so that's a major issue. Who's someone else? Raise your hand.
Yeah, just issues related to mass incarceration.
Mass incarceration. So last week, or 2 weeks ago, we did an entire week of activities around mass incarceration at Spelman, because I direct the social justice program as well. So we did a screening of Rikers, an American jail. And then we had something called Mass Story Lab, where you had individuals who were formerly incarcerated who came in and talked to stakeholders about their experiences. And at the end of the session, we said, okay, what are we gonna do about this, right? So you wanna do something about mass incarceration. So community-based action research might connect you to doing work with individuals who are doing something about educational inequities, right? Working with an organization, okay? But coming up with perhaps policy recommendations for the state legislature or for the school board. So you would be involved in gathering all of the research about this subject matter, because from afar we say it's a problem. But how much of a problem is it? So we need to collect data, right? But we would gather that data, work with community organizers, and create a plan, community-based action research. Mass incarceration. One of the things that we would do, we would continue, what we're planning to do and my students are doing, they're continuing to talk to individuals who are formerly incarcerated, really to lift the theoretical information off of the pages of the books that I require them to read. And we're lifting it up, though. It's being animated by actually engaging in conversations, in-depth interviews with these individuals. And on the basis of that data gathering, then they want to partner with organizations that work with reentry programs. And as they're partnering with those organizations that are doing reentry programs, they're basing it on their research, right? But they're also a part of the discussions around the table about, well, perhaps we should propose to the state legislature that they make this change in the criminal justice policy, right? So you become involved in that action. You're giving service, you're learning because you're doing research, and you're actually creating action. So this is the way you can tie research into some of your community-based interests. Also, I talked about leadership development, research opportunities, global study connected to undergraduate research. Who are the study abroad partners, okay? There are some study abroad programs for students that are a little more willing to step outside of the comfort zone and want to be away for a semester. There's a School for International Travel. SIT provides study abroad programs all over the country, but in each program there's either an internship tied to it or a research experience tied to it, where students get research training, they get college credit for it, but they come back having done research in that country, but also they've been able to learn the methodologies of various disciplinary areas. And then also we know that we can do this work with alternative spring breaks. You know, alternative spring breaks might be in the state of Georgia, they might be outside of the state of Georgia, but we tie in research to whatever it is that we're doing. So you don't just go, and which is very good, you go and you do community service, but what research did you engage in prior to going? Is there a faculty member who's really interested in doing long-term experience with this particular site over several years? So we can begin a project that will continue over 4 years. So again, we have to think creatively about how we engage research. And so we know why it's important. It clearly helps to develop critical thinking and analysis skills, the ability for students to challenge what is common knowledge, right? Because common knowledge really isn't that common, right? Just like they said, common sense isn't that common, right? But common knowledge. We think we know Okay, we think we know things, but we really don't know anything until we dig deep, right? You can look at me and you may have certain assumptions about who I am, but you don't really know anything about me until you actually sit down with me and you ask me questions, that you interrogate what you see, right? You interrogate what you see, and that's true for all of you. Okay, so we want to interrogate what is common knowledge. One might assume in Chattanooga, Tennessee, that the school systems that are performing poorly are all concentrated in a particular area of the city. Okay, that it's a part of the racial divide. But you don't, that's what you assume. You would have to go in and interrogate the data. You would have to look at test scores from the various areas. You'd have to look at the demographics of the schools. This is the way we engage in research. So that's what research helps you to do. You interrogate what is common knowledge. It certainly prepares students for graduate and professional school. So how many students want to go on to graduate and professional school? Okay, so more hands, more hands. So research is very important. You've got to be able to distinguish yourselves, because I work with graduate programs all over the country. And what I can tell you is that graduate and professional school admissions are becoming tighter and tighter. They're admitting fewer and fewer students to their programs. So you have to be able to distinguish yourself. And one way to distinguish yourself is that you've had research. They know that you know what to do when you get into graduate school. They know that you've had training, so it's very important. It also prepares students for varied occupations. Critical thinking skills are so important. I mean, just we know that even, when we're going about our day-to-day lives, you're shopping sometimes and you're in a store and you say, God, I wish this person had more critical thinking skills, right? Because they're not giving you what you want, and you think what you want is very obvious, but they're not thinking, all right? They're not thinking. So you want to develop your thinking skills. You want to develop your interrogation skills, but you also want to be able to develop the ability to challenge individuals who don't have the privilege of the education that you receive, right? Because individuals who are not accustomed to challenging ideas will very readily accept those ideas, right? But because you're a critical thinker, you can say, well, wait a minute. Well, why is that your position? Well, give me some more. You can ask for more information, right? And you can help individuals develop their skills because you're always thinking like a researcher, right? It better prepares citizens who critically analyze data and information, right? There's a lot of data that's being thrown at you all of the time. And basically, we generally accept it. But if you are a critical thinker and you've been engaged in research yourself, you begin to say, well, where did this data come from? Who collected it? Where, what was in fact the bias of the particular individuals who collected the information, right? As researchers, you know that. We know that as we move through looking at Piedmont College, one of the things that makes a program very successful is to make sure that everything that you're doing is related to the college goals, okay? And as students, sometimes because we don't even know what the college goals are, right? We're just kind of moving around, or as faculty members, but everything that you do, okay, and particularly for those faculty members who are in the audience, we know that we're assessed all the time. But if you can show that the work you're doing is directly related to the college institutional goals, right, then you can also ensure the success of your programs. One of the needs that we have is that we have to have well-developed community partnerships if we're interested in community-based research, right? And those partnerships may not necessarily just be in the surrounding area. There may be ways that we can do partnerships in other surrounding areas. You've got to have an institutional infrastructure to support it, okay? And so we know that we've got some, wonderful work that's coming out of Sandra's office and Julie's office. You've got an infrastructure to support research, because you have to be careful about what you ask for. If you want most of your students to be involved in research, then you've got to have the infrastructure to support it, right? Because once you give students something, I've learned this from the social justice program. I thought I was going to do a program for 10 students. The entire campus wants to do social justice, right? And so once we tell students that we're going to give you these opportunities, because how many of you really would like to expand your experience by doing research, some type of research, as we've been talking about it? Okay? Yeah, I mean, hopefully some of you are beginning to think about ways that you might be able to engage in research. We know that there's and I'm going fast because I know I'm going to be doing these over and over again, but we know that research helps students develop their writing skills, their quantitative research skills, okay? Quantitative being able to, engage in statistical analysis of what we see, your qualitative research skills, learning how to engage in conversations that will in fact produce information, produce data. Okay? Learning how to make observations that are data observing observations, focus groups, going and looking at media, right? Some of you are in mass communications. Mass communications create so many opportunities for research, right? What is it that we're seeing? How does visual culture tell us stories about who we are? What stories are being told? Certainly we know in terms of science laboratories, quantitative skills, not enough to be able to do the measurement, but you got to be able to quantify those measurements, right? Or your laboratory experiencing. Theoretical analysis, right? In each of your disciplines within the institution, there's theory base that's associated with your disciplinary area. Well, it's nice to read the theories in the textbook, but it's even better to be able to employ those theories to understand what your observations are. And that's what strong research development will do. And then interdisciplinary support. So many of you, again, we've heard about education and we've heard about mass incarceration. Those are issues that can be examined from a variety of disciplinary perspectives. What's funny in the back? What's funny? You want to share something? You sure? Okay. All right, just happy. All right, very good. All right. So what are your majors? Nursing. All three nursing?
Biology.
Okay, great. Well, it's good that you're happy because that's an important area, and patients want to see happy faces and smiling faces all the time, right? Okay. All right. So we know that as we're looking through this research, as we're looking through the development of kind of doing a shift for Piedmont College around undergirding our experiences with undergraduate research, we know that we want to have a certain toolkit that's available for us. And that toolkit is not just something that the faculty have. The toolkit is something that the students must bring as well, right? And that's a commitment to academic rigor. Right? It's a commitment to intellectual engagement, right? Intellectual engagement, being able to talk to each other about your disciplines, right? Being able to have conversations that extend beyond the classroom. Sometimes you go to a classroom, you read everything that you were required to do in the classroom, and then you don't want to talk about it anymore. But you're young scholars. You are young scholars, and as you begin to see yourself as young scholars, you begin to be more intellectually engaged, more mature in your intellectual engagement. A commitment to problem posing, not just talking about problems all the time, but actually querying those problems, those social issues, social concerns. Why do they exist? Why is there such a great need for community service? We all want to do it, right? But why is the need so great? What is it within kind of the societal structures that causes the need for so much service work? And so these are the ways we begin to problem pose. Critical thinking and analysis, I've talked about that. And then the last one is something that I do a lot with Mellon scholars across the country, is scholar activism. Again, using your work, your scholarship, to actually address social issues and social concerns. And so that's the kind of programming that I'm here to talk with the leaders of Piedmont College about. How do we begin to take the scholarship to another level? So we've talked about millennial students, and then some of you are not millennials, you're post-millennials now. We know that we have these different generational divides. But one of the things that we've learned about millennials, what the data says, is that millennial students who are 18 to 25, or 22 or in college settings right now, millennials as well as post-millennials are engaged, they're interested in active learning. Okay? You want to be able to do something with what you learn, right? And that's why research is important. You want to be able to connect what you're learning to the outside. You don't want it to just be in the laboratory. You want to say, okay, but I'm understanding this biological formula, this what's happening in chemistry. Well, how does this affect individuals? If we're talking about something that's related to pharmaceuticals, what impact will that have on cancer patients? What impact will this have on mothers? What impact will this have on men, right? You want to know what is the connection. You need to understand the value of learning this. Why, are you just teaching me this because it says you're supposed to teach me? What can I do with this, right? Relaxed students. Students want more comfortable classroom interactions with faculty. And so when you have faculty and teacher teams for research, oftentimes it helps to facilitate that. And then students want to actually to feel connected, right? We know that faculty can be connected to students as mentors, and mentoring is different from advising, okay? Advising is, what courses do I need to take for next semester, okay? This is the curriculum, okay, you should take these courses. Mentoring includes that, but mentoring is a more intimate relationship with a student, intimate just in terms of knowledge about a student, more intimate in terms of investment in a student's pathway that she or he is going to undertake. Mentoring is about giving a little bit more of your information to the student, sharing a little bit more about, well, you know what, when I went to nursing school, this is what was required. And this is how I had to balance my experience. So helping students kind of chart their life and their academic pathways. Faculty-student research opportunities often strengthen mentoring relationships with students. And what I am suggesting and what your leadership is suggesting is that these kinds of relationships should begin at the first year, which many of them do here at Piedmont College. But how do you create a structure where research mentorship might begin as soon as students enter the campus, right? And so we know what the Piedmont statement is that, again, you want to involve students with actively contested questions, empirical observations, cutting edge technologies, and a sense of excitement that comes from working to answer important questions. And you want it to connect key concepts and questions with students early, and that we want to create intentional opportunities for students to do problem solving. And so it is possible that through a first-year seminar class, an entire class might come up with one particular problem, okay? Or 2 or 3 particular problems, and groups can work on that problem. So they can determine what is to be investigated and what are the research questions that we want to ask. They can begin data collection together as a group. You know, how are we going to go about finding out about this particular problem? What else do we need to know? Okay? And then they can engage in analysis. The analysis will discuss what their findings are, and they can provide explanations, and then they can base conclusions, right? A first-year group of students is quite capable of establishing issues that they're concerned about, okay? And making those issues, because they're first-year students, they may not know all of the disciplinary framing that's necessary, but they could certainly begin a process of problem identification, okay? How many of you think you all could, if you were a first-year student, you could have identified some problem, some social issue, or something related to your discipline that you could have identified and would have liked working with students on? What would it have been,
For me, I would have talked about how in education, people are sometimes separated into different things, so honors program and the regular students.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to college, that's not really applied anymore.
Yeah, the tracking process, okay? And what would you have wanted to know about it?
I wanted to know how can we strengthen not only the people who came to college, even though they had taken regular classes, but also the people who did go through the honor stuff. How can we best use what they learned and apply that to the college?
Would you assume that the ones who came through honors programs versus the others would be smarter?
I would assume that they would believe so.
Okay. Right. Okay.
And that I
Yeah.
And so when you get here and then you struggle, you get something, well, I was in honors classes,
Yeah.
I got this.
Yeah.
I was prepared more than other people who didn't.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's necessarily true.
Okay, but some people might assume that one would do better than the other, but you would want to investigate that as a particular issue, right? And to see what the potential outcomes are. And so perhaps there would be some data collection, there may be some interviews that are involved with talking to students who represent these various categories about their experiences, but also their expectations. Because expectations go a long way in retention. Okay? What students expect of the experience will in fact feed the experience. You had a point.
Well, I was going to say my interest now, being a first generation college
Yeah.
student and working with first
Yes.
generation college students, would be to work with first year students on researching the trends and the risk factors and all those things associated with first generation college students and what we can do to help retain them. Because there's a lot of social things, there's a lot of familial things, and there's just a lot of barriers.
Right.
So I don't think, I'm guessing a lot of people that are in this audience are first generation college students.
Right.
And they're maneuvering this on
Right.
their own. So I think that would be
Yeah,
interesting.
very. And we also know there's great diversity among first generation students. So there are a lot of variables that you could come up with. Would this research be impactful? Yeah, because the institution would need this research, right? And so there are ways that, for confidentiality purposes, we'd have to figure out how to gather the information in a way that you protect human subjects. But again, this is like a first year project, right? And so there are ways that you can engage first year students in projects that could be thematically based, right? And so everybody's working on a particular theme of research that might carry them to the next year because data gathering continues, right? So very important research, right? And the conclusions would be very important to share, okay? And so I'll show this one to faculty. There's an important TED Talk that talks about faculty and researchers, and so I'll show this to faculty members. But I wanted to just talk a little bit about the ways in which we come together around research topics, okay? So if we go back to this notion of high school tracking, okay, or tracking, educational tracking. So what disciplines would be important in analyzing that? What disciplines? Education, so we know education is important, right? Other disciplines, though. What else might you need to know that another discipline would provide for you? Is there a history? Perhaps we might need to know a little bit of history about just education and secondary education and the ways in which individuals are, in fact, moved through processes, okay? Would psychology be important? Psychology is always important. Are there other disciplines? So my point is you can have one problem, but it can be, in fact, approached from a variety of disciplines, right? There are different knowledges that you need. Did you want to say something? Okay, I thought you was, okay, all right, good. And so what Piedmont is proposing is that the research might be interdisciplinary when you are in fact pulling from one discipline but you're showing the overlap, okay, in the disciplines, right? Or they could be multidisciplinary, so you get your education majors doing one part of the project, you get your psychology majors, you get your biology majors doing something, and everybody just comes together and shares theirs, right? Or it can be just straight disciplinary, right? But these are talking to each other. These are not talking to each other. Transdisciplinary work is that you really don't situate the analysis in any one particular discipline, that you believe that these disciplines kind of have very blurred lines of understanding. And we know that in today's world, most issues need interdisciplinary analysis, right? You need to hear from economists, you need to hear from historians, you need to hear from scientists, you need to hear from a variety of disciplines to address different problems, okay? All right? And so we want to talk about collaborative partnerships where these different pods of interest come together, okay, to collaborate on a particular issue. Okay, does that make sense? Does it make sense for you? Okay, all right. And so this is what we do, okay? And I want you all to just think about this, particularly the students. You identify a topic of interest. We've had a couple of them. You situate your topic of interest within disciplinary or interdisciplinary framework. So if you are, what's your area of specialization? What's your major?
I'm not a student.
I know, but what's your area? You can have an area of specialization, right? Student success, okay? So your training is really about movement, academic progress of students. So you bring a particular lens for this study. You are? Criminal justice. Okay, you bring the criminal justice lens to it because we know that there's individuals who talk about what happens in school settings is very much related to what happens in criminal justice settings as well. There's a school to prison pipeline that also exists, right? But you can bring different areas of interest to this and you situate your questions within that area. Or you may say, you know what, I'm criminal justice, but I'm interested in this. And I don't necessarily know a lot about criminal justice, but I know that I'm interested in this area. And so I want to learn from others who have expertise as we're addressing this issue, right? You formulate research questions, you narrow the scope of your research questions because oftentimes we have big questions that we want to ask because we want to save the world. And we know that you can't save the world in one semester, right? So we have very narrow questions that we build on. You determine how your research questions are addressing your questions or not, questions that are not answered yet. You review and you collect scholarly literature about the topic because you want to know you're not the first one that's been interested in this, okay? Many individuals have written about tracking systems or first generation students. So you want to see what have they written about, okay? And then what questions are they not asking, okay? What samples did they use, right? And did they include people like me in that sample? And if they didn't, I need to advance that research, right? You you select appropriate methodologies, you collect, you analyze your data, and you present your findings, okay? You do that in a big celebration at Piedmont College, at Research Day, and everybody gives you a trophy, and you're really excited, okay? And so there are various ways that we gather data, right? The qualitative ways, interviews, okay? We're very accustomed to interviews because we know we like to talk to people, right? Okay, we like to talk and get information. You might do an ethnographic case study where you actually go to a high school that has this. You might do volunteer work at a high school that has this tracking system to really just kind of get a sense of what's happening in that setting around tracking. And then you go to a college setting. You sit in on at the Student Success Center and find out what students are saying. What are the difficulties, right? You can do content analysis. For many of you who are interested in visual media, you can actually look. You can take magazines. You can take newspapers. Read what are the stories that are being told about a particular area, okay? What are the stories that are being told about first-generation college students? So you could do a content analysis of documents, right? Finding themes. You could also do a literary analysis. Are there people in English or the literary community who've been writing about the divide between kind of the haves and the have-nots, or individuals who are first generation entering into colleges, right? Many works of literature talk about transitions, all right? And so are there individuals who talk about these areas? You could do an autoethnography. You said, I was a first generation college student. I can tell my own story and see how my story relates to the stories of other individuals, right? And then you can do questionnaires, and so quantitative data that you're collecting and you're numerizing it, and you're actually doing an analysis. And triangulation, you do all of them at the same time, right? And so we'll talk more about that. And so we've got various forms of data analysis. Let me just tell you about a few places where you can get data, okay? One is the US Census, right? If you want to know something about a particular community, you all should just do this as an exercise. You can go to this site, and you can actually put in your zip code where you grew up, and it'll give you all kinds of information about your neighborhoods and where you grew up. You'll find out things you didn't even know. You'll find out what the average age is of people in your community. You may have said, well, I thought that there were younger people in this area, but actually the average age is this. You'll find out the educational levels of individuals, you'll find out racial makeups, gender makeups, you'll find out health statistics. You can go right to your uscensus.gov, right? And it gives you all kinds of information that you can use for research purposes, right? And you can do studies based on data that's already been collected for you. You can also do, and I talked a little bit about archival research. Piedmont College has an archives. You can find out information about your college, your history, who attended. You can look at old yearbooks, I would imagine, see what the dress was. You know, did they dress like you're dressing today, or did they dress differently? I mean, you can see all this visual history and tell stories from what you actually gained from the archives. What was the mission statement in 1897? Was it the same? Okay. Did it change over time? When did it change? So these are questions that you can ask. What was the nursing program like then? Was nursing developed to answer a need in the community? Okay. Why is education such a big deal here? Education, students come here from all over the state to get education degrees. When did that start? Okay, so these are things that you can gather from your research, from your archives. There are also material artifacts, you know, if there's paraphernalia, how did it change? You know, if you have Piedmont t-shirts, did that change over time? Religious community archives. You can look at religious texts. You can look at letters, materials. Historical societies is another way that students can actually gather research data. Corporation, state, and local archives. There are a number of active archive research sites. If you're interested, many individuals are interested in Martin Luther King Jr. Okay, we all know who Martin Luther King Jr. is. Okay. Most of his papers have been digitized, and there are places you can go and you can actually read the speeches. You can see paraphernalia from the various marches. You may have a question about his perspective on a particular issue. Our philosophy majors or our religious studies majors, you could actually go to the archive and pull actual copies. You don't have to physically go. You can get it online, right? You can go to the Emory University has probably one of the largest archives among institutions of higher education. The archives are broad. You could actually go and see the note taking from individuals who've written important texts. Alice Walker's papers are at the Emory University Library, but so are the papers of many literary figures. You could go and actually go online to the digital archives and get the information from there. You can go to various scholar databases and really kind of put in what it is that you're looking for, and you will be able to see the real materials there. So archival research is something that is growing among colleges and universities for research, for undergraduate research experiences. And because of digitization, you have so much that's available to you. In the program, the sociology program that I'm in, I wanted to just share something with you all. And we have a staggered process, staggered process for research, where students actually, the culminating experience for all of our graduating majors is a senior thesis. They have to write a senior thesis. Do you all, any of you have senior thesis requirements? Your capstone, senior capstone experiences. Well, we began our students' training for the capstone experience when they take the first course in sociology, right? So students in my class right now, the sociological imagination class that meets at 8:00 a.m. on Tuesdays and Thursdays, the students are writing what we call a mini thesis, right? It's not going to be their end product, but they're learning how to formulate research questions, and they're learning how to develop a literature review. And they're getting it critiqued. They're turning it into me. I'm going over the drafts, and I'm giving them suggestions. At the end of the semester, they'll have a mini thesis that has their research questions, a literature review, a theoretical framework, right? Then they'll leave my class, and they'll go to the next two classes, they'll go to a history of social thought class, where they'll be learning more about theory and sociology. They'll be able to add what they're learning in that class to what they learned in the first class. Then they'll go to another class that talks about methodologies. They're still talking about those research projects. Then they'll learn how would I actually go out and research this question that I began formulated in the early class. And then once they do that, and there's several courses they can take, then they'll go to a data analysis class. I'm not sure why that's not holding up on the full screen. They'll go to a data analysis class. So by the time they get to their senior year, their senior thesis, if they followed the pathway, their thesis is pretty much done. The senior year is to refine it. Now, in between that, they've gone abroad, and we've told them, if you're going abroad, you need to, let's think about where you should go so that you can do research that continues to support your questions. If you're planning your course selections, if your analysis, the questions that you have are gendered, well, maybe you should take some courses in women's studies, or maybe you should take some courses over in environmental sciences or neuroscience in order to build your knowledge base. So it's a graduated program. How many of you think that you would be able to, you like something like that, where you start in the first year and you just start moving through, okay? By the time you graduate, you should be fairly a pretty good expert on the topic. And so that's what we attempt to do with our programs. And so just lastly, I'll just say that there are a number of ways that we believe that we can engage you all in research. There may be departmentally based undergraduate research programs, might be first and second year thematic courses. So you might do a course on democracy. But that's the theme. People are in the class from a variety of areas, but everybody's looking at democracy and how they're defining what democracy is, and doing research and seeing what's been written about democracy, going out asking students questions about their conceptions of democracy, gathering that data, and at the end of the semester, they have some type of presentation, right? So it could be thematic. You could actually have the graduated course introduction that I just shared that we do with sociology, or you could have major coursework supporting development of which is the same capstone experience. You might adopt a Mellon Mays program where you work with a faculty mentor, and that faculty mentor may have some research that she or he is working on, or together you and the faculty member come up with some research, and that faculty mentor works with you throughout your time working on that single project, right? And so by the time you get ready to graduate, you have a major project that you and a faculty member have worked on. Or you have a specific undergraduate research requirement. Okay? Everybody has to do undergraduate research. You figure out what you're going to do and you share it with a board, and the board approves what that undergraduate research is. And then also, if there's special programs, if there's an honors program, perhaps there's a research program associated with that. Okay? What I wanted to do today is to kind of share, and this is another example of a thematic example, citizenship. So these are the questions you might, who has assumed responsibility for defining citizenship? Has the definition changed over time? Is it biologically determined? Does biology matter in citizenship? So, because we know there's been one-drop rules and all of that, so we know that biology is important. Is it culturally determined? Does culture matter? What visual images do we have of citizenship? How do social institutions inform our understanding of citizenship? How does rights discourse inform citizenship? What works of literature address questions of citizenship? What role can college students play in affirming citizenship rights? Is this an interdisciplinary project? You think? No? Is it interdisciplinary?
I thought it would be like the transdisciplinary.
Okay, why is it trans? Good observation. Good.
It's kind of encompassing, like you're going from the biology part of it to the social side of it. And
Yeah.
Curious to kind of see what it is.
Yeah, that there's no one discipline that can answer it, right? Okay, so would this be of interest to students, this kind of project? Okay, have you done projects like this before? No? Okay, so this is an example of the types of projects that we're proposing, okay? What questions do you have? What questions do you have as students about undergraduate research? Do you think it's important for Piedmont to follow this pathway?
I guess my question is, as somebody that works with students, how has your college changed the culture of the importance of wanting to be involved in research?
Yeah.
Because I invited some of my students too, and they're probably like, never even thought about research. I'm a first semester student. How do you, how did you get buy-in?
Yeah.
Or get them to understand the importance of, it's not just about going to class, getting an A on this test, getting a B on this, like I have to invest. How do you change that culture?
Right. Well, I think it starts, so we know the retention starts with admission, right? Okay. And what we promote on the outside. And so students who are coming to Spelman College are expecting a certain type of educational experience. And so a part of that educational experience, the package of goodies that you're going to receive, is that you'll be able to develop your critical thinking skills, that you will have opportunities for undergraduate research experiences, that you'll do study abroad. So it's a package. And so we know that it permeates the culture, because we also know that we want our students to go to graduate school, we want them to go to professional school, we want them to get jobs, right? And we believe that one of our beliefs is that you have to have these skills if you're going to be able to do the postgraduate experience. So it becomes a part of the culture, but it's an important question because everyone has to invest, right? Everyone has to invest, but you can share the workload. You can share the workload because all of this, I mean, it could be group activities. There are a number of ways that you attach it to something that's already going on. So you don't have to create new opportunities or venues. You begin to attach it to what else, the other experiences. Other questions? Thank you for asking. Questions? Yes.
Do you feel like having this overarching, I guess, goal affects the motivations of the students, because it's no longer just grades, it's a tangible goal?
Yeah. What do you think? What do you think?
I would think so.
You think so? Yeah. I mean, I wasn't being flippant. That I'm interested. What do you all think? Do you think that this makes a positive difference in terms of, what do you think? Because it's for the students, and so student input is very important.
I think personally it would motivate me more so, I think. Even if it's outside of just coursework necessarily, a grade that I would need, just something that I'm able to like really sink my teeth into outside of that, I think would motivate me more.
Okay. Others that think, well, gosh, that's just something, another add-on. I mean, it's okay. Others who think, no, we shouldn't go this way, or you're afraid to. So I have to ask you that when all the administrators are out of the room. Okay. Do you see, does this connect? Is it important for your learning to be connected to your experiences, or you got one life outside of college and another life inside of college, and the two don't need to meet? Is that? No?
I think for me, I'm a senior. I wish I would have had something where like all 4 years, because I'm a very passionate person, and so when I get attached to an idea, I like to develop it. And I feel like that would have been very cool to have, and to be able to, like, when going towards like grad school, be like, this is what I can present on, this is what I've been working towards.
Yeah.
And so I think it's very interesting. I think it'd be great. We would have to start that in our freshman.
Yeah. Okay. Are there impediments to starting something like this as first-year students from the student's perspective? Young woman, sister with the blue, the aqua. What do you think?
I think that it's like it would definitely make people like more passionate. Like he said, it wouldn't be just about grades. It's more, it would be like something that we work really hard on with the faculty or with other people that are surrounding that are interested in something like that. And I think that it would make it more of like it would kind of combine like our lives like outside of school and inside of school together, and it would make it better, and us, like, it would allow us to be more defined as well-rounded students.
Okay. Good.
Well, I'm almost wondering if this could be woven into, sounds like this is the structure, you have a multi-year, a first-year experience, second-year experience, so each year, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, has this level built in that is a requirement or certain options.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Others. Faculty. Do we have other faculty members here? Yes. What are your thoughts? And which division do you represent?
I'm in English.
Okay.
I love this. I mean, the question that we have back here right now is, how do your students at Spelman feel about choosing the topic as a freshman and then having to stick with that topic for
Yeah.
4 years?
Yeah, they don't have to stick with this topic. They don't. And so we tell them, and I tell them, and many of them, they're either second semester first year students or first semester sophomores when they do sociological imagination. I say, you're not bound to this topic. You're absolutely not, because things change. You know, things change. Students are interested in other areas, but at least they have the experience. So they're learning, how do you conceptualize a problem or an issue within that discipline, but they don't. The students who do stick with it, they have much, you see that their theses end up being much more researched because they've been working on it for all of these years, but they are definitely not bound, not at all. Because the main thing is you're trying to teach skills. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Any other questions?
Thank you guys.
Okay, thank you for being so attentive. Thank you. Thank you.